Yes, yes.
Okay.
Okay, we're going live. We're going live on YouTube.
Right now?
Yep.
Okay. And you're going to introduce us, right?
Yep. Hi, welcome to another Ask the Expert event. Today, we've got what's new in New York for ServiceNow governance, risk, and compliance. Welcome, Teresa. Go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, and thank you all for joining us. We're really excited. My name is Teresa Law. I am the Senior PMM for GRC, and with me I have Utkarsh Jain.
Hi, everyone.
Utkarsh is going to be doing an amazing demo for you all. But first I wanted to run us through a few introductory slides and tell you about a few things that I think are really cool. Utkarsh is the PMM for GRC risk. There we go. But there's three other applications associated with GRC. We have PMMs for those, built on the Now platform. There's a lot of different types of risk across the enterprise. Vendor risk, digital risk. Organizations are trying to deal with non-compliance, audit issues, legal, operational risk. And operational risk is one of those things we're really going to talk about today in our demo and see some of the neat new features of GRC New York. We have other new features in GRC New York that are useful for the different lines of business users in particular. Find this very, very useful, our new mobile capabilities. Mobile has been introduced across all of our product lines for New York, especially also GRC. So let's take a look a little bit about what we did in GRC. In GRC, we introduced a new policy and compliance and risk applications on the mobile app. You can do a variety of things for policy and compliance. You can manage your policy exceptions, your indicator tasks, your issues. You can assign work to other people. You can ensure that your work is not going to be slipping or become overdue. Let's take a look really quick at one of the ways we can do policy exceptions. It's as simple as hitting the little hamburger at the top and selecting approve, reject. You can edit it to add information. When you assign tasks to other people, or you look at issues and pass issues along, you can edit those to add your comments. From a risk standpoint, you can accept risk tasks, indicator tasks. We can look at assessments. And again, remediation tasks. So for remediation tasks, you can assign those to other people, or you can edit them to add comments. This is really designed to help you because we realize people aren't just sitting at their desks. They're on the go. They need to be able to do their work as they're continuing to move around. It's just the way we do business nowadays. There's an app on Apple Play, on Apple Store or Google Play that you need to download for that. And then of course, just get our, assign the instance that you have in your organization. That's really as simple. I downloaded it the other day and it was amazing. And then you can log off, you can log on as different users. So it's incredibly simple. So we're really excited about that. We're going to be continuing to enhance that over time. But it's not just mobile that we did in New York. We made some nomenclature changes. And this is something that we've been talking about and hearing about for quite some time, attempting to make the terminology that ServiceNow uses more common across not only ServiceNow but other GRC applications. So these nomenclature changes, the most notable one really is changing profiles to entities. So when you upgrade to New York, your navigation bar is going to change. You can see on the right over here. And you're going to see a bunch of entity classes and entity types and entities. The other change that we made was changing policy statements to control objectives. So you'll see that again in your navigation bar. And we really think this is going to make it a lot easier to communicate and to use the product and to ramp up very quickly. So we're really excited that we were able to do this in New York. But that's really not all. There's more. Across ServiceNow, we have been integrating our products more and more. So GRC is now part of other products. For example, our vendor risk management application, where we're able to assess the risk of vendors. We calculate it, and then we identify the risk rating, minor, major, high, critical. We track what types of vendors there are out there. And then, of course, we tier the vendors, and we help make sure that you can manage the risk that your vendors are posing to you. Well, in our new ITSM Pro vendor management application, which was our vendor performance application prior to this, we now have that risk rating on the dashboard. We also have on the upper left-hand corner, that's not highlighted here, we have what type of vendor it is, the person, whether it's operational or not. So being able to track not only the performance of your vendors, but also the risk that they pose to you in one place is very valuable for customers. So we've added that. We've also integrated GRC in with our application portfolio management application. So now what you're going to see in the related lists on the APM application, you're going to see a risk tab. So now your business or your critical business services that you care very much about and that you're managing the life cycle of, one of those things that you care about is compliance and risk. It fills a gap. So now we plug that gap with ServiceNow GRC. You can also manage your audit engagements, as you can see from the other tab that's been added to the APM application. So those are some of the key things that we've done, but there's more. This is what Utkarsh is actually going to show you in real time here. He's going to talk about some of our new operational risk enhancements. Now, we have a new application in New York called Advanced Risk. And Advanced Risk is really where we're going to really fill in a lot of the enhancements around operational risk. We also have some core GRC enhancements that we're going to go over. So we have the concept of standalone entities now, and Utkarsh can talk a little bit about that. He can talk a little bit about the ability to do ad hoc risks and entities and controls. And then something that's really nice, I think, is the ability to configure the number of days before a policy goes back to draft mode. So hopefully all of you are aware of the fact that we manage the policy lifecycle. When a policy gets to a valid to date, we want to make sure that it's then, and typically it's once a year, we want to make sure that it's then reviewed again to make sure nothing has changed. The way that we ensure that happens is we automatically send it back to a draft state. So all the stakeholders in your organization that you have identified that need to look at this policy are able to look at this policy and approve it or change it, update it. We've now changed that from 30 days, which is what it was originally scheduled as, to be whatever it is you want it to be, because we realize that all policies are different. And then, of course, policy exceptions, which we introduced a couple of releases ago, are now available on the service portal. So that's a very quick overview of some of the things we've done in GRC. And I know everyone's really excited about actually seeing some of this stuff in action. Yeah. So let me turn it over to Utkarsh, who's going to now demo for you our now ServiceNow GRC New York release. Utkarsh.
Thanks, Teresa. So what I'm going to do is probably just take a slide to set the context here, and then we will be live in the system seeing all the stuff that Teresa has been talking about, right? So let me share my PowerPoint here, and I hope everyone can see it now. Yeah. Okay. So most customers, when we talk about operational risk, they talk about operational risk being driven from organizations. So you have a complex organization structure, such as having multiple business lines, and these business lines are probably having sub-organizations within themselves. So here I'm seeing a sample organization called Acme Incorporation, which is having two business lines. One is around the banking and investment area, and the other one is around retail. The banking and investment in itself can be broken down further into retail banking, commercial banking, and so on and so forth. And then you can have sub-hierarchies under it. The key point to note is your assessments are generally done, specifically the first line assessments that are called as RCSAs or PRCSAs or those kind of things are generally done at the granular levels of retail banking, commercial banking. But all your reporting and everything else is done at the top level. So somebody looking at it from an enterprise view really needs to understand what's my first line defense of users talking about in terms of the risk, right? So they are looking at it from an aggregated information. So that's pretty important. It's like a roll-up of what we call it as a bottom-up risk assessment, right? Similarly, to ensure everybody in the organization speaks one common language, you need to have one centralized risk taxonomy. For example, you may say, I have various risk classes or risk categories like operational risk, information technology, financial. You can break down your operational risk into theft and fraud, product risk. Theft and fraud can be further broken down into disclosure of business record, unauthorized trading, right? And then you say unauthorized trading is applicable for retail banking, and you want the retail banking risk managers or the risk champions sitting within that line to actually perform an assessment on this risk, right? So those are the key advantage that customers get doing all this is when somebody asks a question saying how high unauthorized trading is, or what's the overall impact of unauthorized trading as a top risk, is it our top 10 risk? Because you're aggregating this information across the organization, you're getting one overall risk posture on that corresponding entity or that corresponding risk record. So that's the key to note, right? So you have your centralized risk taxonomy, you push down your risk assessment to your first line saying, hey, entity owner for retail banking, can you assess the disclosure of business records for retail banking? Can you assess unauthorized trading for retail banking? And he would do the assessment. And what you want is, similarly, if somebody does it for commercial banking, you want the risk to roll up to the top and say, hey, Acme operational level, what's my overall risk profile? At operational risk level, what's my overall risk profile? So these kind of questions that customers have been asking and probably doing it in Excel or maybe spending a lot of time doing it can now be automated into the system. With that, let me go into the system to show you how do we really do this stuff.
So having a top-down and a bottom-up
That's correct.
is
Yes.
the way to go. We actually had a wonderful presentation at Knowledge this last year on having top-down and bottom-up view of risk, how important that is.
Exactly. So I'm going to navigate to the entity form first, and let me say I start with Acme Incorporation, right? So when I open up the Acme, and I'm going to search for it. So I say, let's say Acme Retail Banking or Banking and Investment. And within Acme Banking and Investment, if you see, there are two downstream entities that are associated with this. One is retail banking and the other one is a commercial banking, right? Similarly, if I go back and I look at something like Acme Retail, right? So your Acme Retail is an entity which is rolling up to your overall Acme level. So customers have this hierarchical relationship. Now, in this corresponding view that we were seeing, if you notice, the enhancement that Teresa was talking about earlier, we always wanted to point it to a CI record within ServiceNow, which is your CMDB. Now you can create these standalone entities here. So we have this small checkbox here. As soon as you say it does not refer to an existing record, you can create this as a standalone entity. So it doesn't have to be really a ServiceNow record for you to perform a risk assessment or for you to assess your controls. So that's how you would establish your risk hierarchy. So once you do that, obviously you may want to visualize it. So we have a wonderful visualization in the form of GRC Workbench, where you can actually view this. So if I'm looking at it from, let's say, Acme Retail Banking or Acme Banking and Investment purposes, I can see those corresponding organizations in a more organic fashion that my brain is used to, right? So you can actually see all this relationship and working and say how the risks are rolling up to the top. So much on the entity side. Now let me navigate to a risk view to show you how you can establish a risk hierarchy in the system. So for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into risk statements. And let's say within my organization, I identify a new risk, right? So I'm trying to create a risk called accepting a bribe. I have my operational risk, which is sitting within my lines of business, and I'm identified that bribe as a risk is probably going up, and therefore we need to maintain it into the centralized taxonomy. I say, what's the parent of it? Now look at this. You have the entire hierarchy so that you can actually establish these levels, saying accepting a bribe rolls up to theft, fraud, unauthorized access, or activity which rolls up to operational risk. Similarly, in one integrated platform, you have your IT risk, so your information technology risk, which is around information security, information infrastructure, performance, operations. I can break it down further to say information security, loss of confidentiality is one of them. So using one ServiceNow integrated platform, customers can do various kinds of risk assessment. They can do their operational risk assessment. They can do their IT risk assessment. And all of them come together to give you one integrated view of what's happening within your organization.
Yeah.
Isn't that powerful?
That's amazing. And the really interesting thing is this, looking at this, and it's really across the enterprise. It's not just a particular department.
Exactly.
You can do this across the enterprise, so you can truly have a way to holistically look at your risk and prioritize your risk across legal and finance and customer service and HR and IT and security, and it's really just the limit is the possibility is what you decide.
Yeah.
In those possibilities. Really.
Absolutely. And I don't
art of the possible, I guess. That's the thing.
And I don't have to maintain these multiple tools. Customers have been maintaining one for vendor risk, one for op risk, one for IT. Now it's just one tool.
Consolidating it.
Yeah.
And I guess, but the thing we should say is, this can't do absolutely everything. We still have our partners.
Yes.
We still need
Absolutely.
the data. We still need to have the input of the vulnerabilities or the risk ratings for vendors or whatever. Our partners are a key part of this, but being able to take all of that and to put it in one place and manage that in one place is so powerful. That's so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. So I say that accepting a bribe as a risk is applicable for, let's say, a couple of organizations that are in scope. So it's applicable for retail. It's applicable for, let's say, banking and investment or retail banking as a business unit, right? So I'm saying these risks are applicable to those corresponding areas. And what I'm essentially saying is, hey, Mr. X within retail banking, who is a risk manager, can you perform an assessment on this and tell me what's the risk posture for your organization, right? So from a second line of defense perspective, I'm pushing down these assessments to say, hey, can you do your self-assessments and tell me what's happening within your organization? So the risk manager sitting within the second line is automating his job, and he doesn't have to go around and say, hey, have you performed? Have you performed? The system will do it for you.
Send the email.
Yeah.
Send the spreadsheet.
Or schedule meetings.
Schedule the meeting. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's how customers will be able to perform a risk assessment. Now, let's say somebody from first line actually performs these risk assessments that you have. And let me pick up one of the risks, probably that has already some assessments assigned to it, right? So I go into this risk and let's say loss of productivity that has already been assessed. So you can see a scoring on it. So I can go back. Let me pick up a different one here. Let me say employees not motivated for new skills, since we are talking about operational risk. And as you can see that I've done my inherent assessment. So I've scored my risk saying inherent impact is very high, likelihood is extremely likely, but I have some controls in place. And that's bringing down my residual to a high and a likely level with the overall score from very high to high. Now this risk will be rolled up to the top level across multiple dimensions automatically. So at a retail banking level, the system is telling me that you have 3 risks within retail banking. And based on the 3 risks that you have within retail banking, the overall value that you are expected to lose is around 16 million. This is your sum of calculated yearly. On an average, you may lose around 16 again because you just have one. So probably this is a bad example that I take. Let me take a different one. So maybe within retail, yeah. So within retail, I have multiple risks here, 7 risks. And you can see the sum that I'm expected to lose is around 58 million. But on an average, I would lose around 11.6 million. At a bare minimum, it's around 4 million. And at a maximum, is around 20 million, right? So you're getting this from all 4 dimensions, and then you can decide what you do about this risk, right? So based on this aggregated information that you're getting, now I, as an entity owner, I, as Morgan Hunter of this, who's an owner for this business, I have better posture on what's happening within my organization. And the good thing is, yeah, all this math is happening, but when you want to report on it, a lot of customers want to simplify. They want to say, oh, this is a high risk or this is a medium risk. So the system automatically does this translation for you, saying, based on the aggregated information that you get, the calculated score is a high, right? So that you can then look at these entities at an abstract level and then deep dive further to say, how high is it? Am I going to lose $1 million or am I going to lose a $10 million? So that's how customers can easily establish their risk roll-up reporting and can view these information. So this is across just one dimension, which is the entity dimension. Now, if I'm looking at it similarly from a risk manager's hat perspective, if I wear a hat for a risk manager, I can view this also on a risk statement, and I can see how my aggregated risk profile is. So I can see my sum of calculated ALE being 32 million, while my maximum that I'm supposed to lose is 16 million. So sum is really, if everything is going bad, all the risk materializes, what am I expected to lose? While your maximum is, if one of the worst case risk materializes, what's the value you're supposed to lose? So that's how you decode this information, right? So this really simplifies the way people look at risk, and they can make better decisions then based on this aggregated information.
Yeah, it definitely improves decision making. I think also this level of automation where it automatically calculates it for you. How long would it take if someone had to manually? I mean, people do this.
Yeah,
they do it now.
It takes weeks.
Yeah, it takes weeks. And then by the time you're finally finished with that,
you have new assessments.
Yes, you're already out of date.
Yes,
it's already old. Yeah, so I mean, the fact that you can look at this in real time is one thing, so if you're current, right? But also the fact that it's automated is saving you tremendous amounts of time. So those people that were doing that before are now off doing more valuable tasks. Absolutely. You're not getting rid of people. Yes. You're just being able to redirect them into more high value tasks.
Yeah. That's correct.
Yeah, awesome. I think this is fabulous. I think people are going to love this. This is one of the key features in New York that we're really excited about.
Yeah. And now when you look at this, so far so good. So I did what I was supposed to do, but risk management is all about being proactive. Mm-hmm. How much did we expect to lose? How do I get a measure of that? Mm-hmm. Right. So is it below our risk appetite?
Right.
Or is it beyond our risk appetite?
Can you tell me?
Yes, absolutely. So what you can do is all the areas that you believe, for example, for an entity, I can say I'm expected to lose 10 million and then measure these aggregated risk assessment reports against that mark to say, am I doing better or am I doing worse than what I planned for? How do I do that? So if you see on the top, you have two fields. One is an expected ALE and the other one is max acceptable ALE. So imagine these are your tolerance levels. So let's say I expect to lose around 20 million at max, and I'm going to set up that value. But I may have a threshold of up to 25 million. I still can manage it. But in a best case scenario, I want everything to be below 20 million. So let's say I do this. Now, if you see this, the system automatically compared and said, hey, you're doing okay. Actually, the decisions you're taking is below the appetite level of your.
Because the max calculated ALE is actually less than your maximum acceptable ALE.
Absolutely. Yep. So the system says, hey, Mr. X, you're doing okay, not to worry about it. While if I reduce that and I say this to a 10 and a 15, you would see suddenly the system will say, hey, this is unacceptable.
Attention. Yep.
You need to focus on this. And what we also do is we trigger emails to the corresponding user saying, hey, suddenly your risk profile has changed. You may want to look at it, maybe contact somebody and figure this out. Mm-hmm. So that way, people can proactively manage their risk efficiently. And this is not just across a single dimension of risk statement, but even at an entity level. For example, if I go to Acme Banking and Investment, I see the same values being here. So now when you're performing the risk assessments, different level of organizations may have different thresholds. So at a banking and investment level, I have a threshold of 30 million. But if I go into the child entity, which is retail banking, it has a much lower threshold of 10 million.
Right.
So even though these risk assessments are happening at a bottom-up level, I'm able to analyze the impact of it given the size of the business that I'm actually operational in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that really simplifies all of the reporting that customers were doing to say, how do we report on the tolerance status? How do we report on the actual risk rating? So
Right.
now for you to actually do an automation on your reporting, you can set up dashboards in the system. So I'm going to show you some of the sample dashboards that you get out of the box, right? So let's say I'm logging in as an entity owner now, and I really want to understand how many entities are there within my organization that are performing, how they are performing. So I look at this information and I see some of my entities are at very high risk, some of them are moderate, some of them are high, and I can break it down. So let me do that. Let me just quickly break it down based on the entity owners here. So I'm going to navigate back. Probably this user doesn't have the dashboard here to look at that information. So I'm going to go back and see that now. So if you see, as an aggregated entity owner, you have a nice dashboard here. So your entity tolerance status, yes, okay. Yeah, so from a user perspective, he's really looking at this information and analyzing, is it operational risk that is going high? Is it IT risk that is going high? Or is it people-related risk that is going high? And I can then look at it from an unacceptable view saying, okay, what are the risks that have gone beyond the threshold that I imagined it to be, right? Similarly, on an aggregated information, I'm seeing how many risks are very high, how many of them are high, how many of them are moderate. So you look at all these dashboards here, and then you don't even have to report to them. Your executives and your top management just share this dashboard with them, and they have a real-time view of what's happening within your organization.
It's a great way to communicate to other departments also. I mean, I saw, here you've got another one I saw here where you had different departments where you can actually,
absolutely,
you can actually talk about, okay, in this particular department, you realize you've got this sort of risk occurring. It's maybe operational risk, maybe it's IT risk, because every department has a mix of risks. So being able to actually see which is high in which areas, and then you can look across geographies, if you've got different entities across geographies, and you can really compare and contrast, and you can have some really intelligent conversations. So it's a great way to communicate across departments. But yeah, I mean, we do it here, right? We take these dashboards, we take these reports, we put them into presentations, and then we show them at the board level.
Yes.
To be able to talk about it. Because I think one of the big things is having a common language.
That's great.
And a common framework. So if you're used to seeing this presented in this way, and you see it that way every quarter, every month, every review cycle, then it's familiar, and you can have a really valuable discussion, and you can really see where the changes have occurred and decide if that's above your risk appetite or if it's acceptable.
But what about if the user wants to understand how is my entity performing, right? So what are the key risks that's driving my entity? Is it operational risk? Is it IT? How do I do that? And you have a third report here, which actually gives you a pivot between the two to say, for Acme Banking and Investment, it's actually your operational risk that's driving your overall risk posture.
And is that okay? There's a discussion you need to have.
Exactly.
All right.
And then as a business owner, somebody at an enterprise level, I can also compare the business performance of my different business, saying, hey, in retail banking, the IT risk is much lower than in banking and investment. Maybe we can share some common practices.
Yep. And that gets again to that whole top-down view and discussion about risk that has to be set. The appetite has to be set at the higher level versus the bottom-up roll-up of risk.
That's correct.
To be able to get that view allows you to have this kind of report that allows you to have the necessary discussions.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's how, I mean, and these are just sample dashboards that we ship. Customers will create their own. So you can automate using our performance analytics capabilities. You can look at the trends. That how these risk profile trends are changing. You can maybe even forecast. So it has forecasting capabilities within PA that you can say, next year, are we going to do that? So that's how you're going to change your way you actually manage your risk.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think that's really important. The ability to have these dashboards that are customized for the people, for their particular use. And the fact that the other thing ServiceNow does, especially with, you mentioned PA, performance analytics, is, you know, we can really easily build these dashboards. It's a drag and drop sort of thing. It's not, it's not difficult.
So you don't need Tableau.
No, you don't need Tableau, and it gives you the view you need to do your job. And it comes with the GRC product.
Absolutely. So much so on the proactive side. But I do my job, I do my operations, but when we talk about risk, there are events that are happening on a day-to-day basis. How do I manage my risk events? How do I analyze what are the financial money that I'm losing because of these risk events? Or maybe even the non-financial. There are negative market news. What are we doing about them? How do you manage these risk events in a ServiceNow kind of a solution? And for that, what we did is, on the reactive side of things, we designed something called as a risk events functionality, which is essentially your losses, your financial losses, or even any negative reputational kind of impact that you're encountering in your day-to-day business operations, and giving you one big register of this risk events for you to analyze your control efficiency, to say, yeah, our controls are working efficiently because we have been able to minimize these losses, as well as identify new risks because your market conditions are changing. So you may not even have that risk in your system. So now, using those risk events functionality, you can do that. How do we do it actually live in the system? So let me now log in as a user who is the first line user. And for them, the best view to log these risk events is probably somebody from service portal. So I'm going to go into a service portal. So the business line that we see is really in terms of you as a user being able to push your risk event reporting to your first line. So how do we do that? So I go into catalog, and if I have already logged a similar risk event, I would get an action here called report a risk event. Now in this, as a first line user, you get a very simplified view of a risk event form, right? So you see this, there are just 5 or 6 key fields that I'm asking for. So this really pushes the adoption of your GRC solution across the first line of defense and saying, as part of your day-to-day business, if you encounter anything that has a materialistic impact on the risk posture of an organization, you need to report this. So that's your policy on how you manage your risk. So I'm going to say, right, I'm going to, as a first line user here, I'm going to say there was a fire in server room that was being reported. So I need to actually report this risk event, and I could provide a detailed description around this. And then say the entity where it was caused was probably retail banking. And it did have a financial impact as per me. Now, when I'm reporting this, it's just an initial gut estimate on how much money I'm going to lose. So I'm saying I'm going to lose probably $10,000. There's somebody, an expert, who is doing all the math behind it. But for me, I'm just putting a dollar value so that somebody can actually prioritize this risk event better and can work on it depending on what the loss threshold that it may actually escalate to. So the date of discovery, so let's say 17th, and how was the event discovered, and maybe some actions that you have taken, and as per you, there's a root cause to it. So that's how simple it is for the first line to report this risk event across the organization.
So anybody can do this. I mean, I can be walking down the hall and I see smoke coming out from underneath the door, and I realize this is the server room.
Absolutely.
And that's the whole point. This isn't the risk manager or the compliance manager or the executive of audit that has to do this. This is literally any employee, and I've actually seen this on a mobile device.
Yes.
Even
that is correct.
I've actually seen it
Yeah.
on the, so I mean, really, really simple. And this again is that whole reactive thing, because we have the whole proactive side, which is our continuous monitoring, to be able to make sure that we are staying on top of stuff, but we can't predict everything.
You can't.
So this is the way that we manage those.
And to predict, you need data. How do you collect data? You collect through this.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So now,
Simple.
This really pushes that option to your first line saying, oh, I'm walking in, I had an incident, I want to take a pic and report this as a risk event.
Mm-hmm.
As simple as that. Now, when you do this, obviously there's a lot of behind the scene work that somebody has to do. So somebody within the first line, like a risk manager, will get a notification in the system to say, hey, a user has reported a risk event. So I'm just going to go and log in as a risk event user now, right? So risk manager. So let's say Morgan Hunter is my risk manager here. And if you see, you would get an event like this now. So you have your fire and server room that has been reported. Recently, I see this is in a new state, which means I still need to work on it. I need to first triage and maybe ask a few more questions before I can decide, is this really a risk event or is it just an incident that happened without any materialistic impact to my risk posture? So you want to differentiate between the two. If it's a legitimate risk event, let me pick up one where I've already added a few more details to say what kind of details and what is the life cycle of it. So your life cycle is really, you do need to capture a lot of data around this risk event. Now you see how the system has abstracted depending on the persona who is using the system. Now, if a risk manager, because he's an expert in managing these risk events, he gets a lot more information for him to do that. What kind of things he would do? For this risk event, what he would do is he would for sure like to analyze whether this is a financial or a non-financial event, right? So something which doesn't have a dollar value associated is probably non-financial, but it's still very, very important for me as an organization. What's the category of this? Is it a legal event? Is it an HR? Is it information security, health and safety? So your different events, it's just not about loss events. Any events across the board can be maintained in one system because it's having an impact on my risk.
This gets back to the whole point of this is really an enterprise system.
This is an
across all your departments.
That's good. Yes. And for this, I have multiple losses that is associated with it, right? So I see a direct impact of $100,000 because of the loss of assets I have because of this fire business. I also lost business because my server room went down and I was not able to bring it up for next 2 hours. So I have an indirect loss of $10,000. I probably, to get this up and running, I have to do some firefighting, maybe hire a few consultants, and for whom I paid a fee of $15,000. And then I was able to make a couple of recoveries. So I have my $10,000, which was able to recover, and this was $5,000 I was able to recover. So I was able to make a total recovery of $15,000. Now, all of them, if you see, are happening in different date, and each of them can happen in different currencies. So if you have a risk event for a global organization, you can actually have multiple impacts across the organization, across the geography, and then convert automatically using our standard currency exchange into one base currency to say, okay, at a summary, how much are we losing? You're losing overall as 100,000 is your direct impact, but the gross loss that comes to after all the math is actually 125,000. But since we made a recovery of 15,000, your net loss is just 110,000. So the system is doing all the math for you to say what's the corresponding impact, right? So imagine this, if it was multiple currencies, you don't have to go into to convert them into standard currency, the system will take care of you for you, right?
The automation.
The automation, exactly. Now, when you do this, there are multiple dates corresponding to this risk event. The date when you first recognize this in your book of accounts, When did you do that? A lot of customers, they do a financial reconciliation to say whether my ERP system and my loss event system that I have are actually matching or not. If there are discrepancies, you may want to resolve them. When did you discover it? When did it occur? All the 3 dates could differ, right? So you can have different dates being maintained and then being reported for certain of our customers, like the financial sectors. It's a Basel requirement to actually report these dates across and all these risk events to their corresponding regulator on a periodic basis. So you can do that in the system. I can say this risk event has actually caused is expected to lose around 100,000. So you're doing like a human judgment on it as to what is the potential loss it could escalate to and that corresponding value. If it has a credit or a market risk reference, so a lot of operational risk event may also have an overlap with them. So you can classify that here. You can say this as a credit risk reference and your credit risk system has this corresponding risk as well. So you can track it here saying this is a risk reference for a credit risk system. Now, once
that way, if you've got this appears in other systems, you can triangulate or correlate.
exactly
You can alert people that they're going to see it in another system also.
Yes.
So it's again that whole concept of communication, so that everyone knows what's going on.
Absolutely. So once you have this, you want to say what are the risks that's impacted. Now, the reason this is important is next time you're doing an assessment on loss of productivity, you definitely want to see how many events have happened in the past. And based on that, I can better score it. And somebody asks me, what is the impact and what is the likelihood of this risk? I have my risk event register to say in the past, we lost around $10 million around this risk. Because we have better controls this time in place, maybe we'll still lose a couple of million. That's my prediction. And I'm sure we're going to lose around with 80% pro confidence, right? So using this as a database, you don't have to be guessing what your risk would be. Rather, you can use this as a basis to say, I made this prediction based on this historical database. So really, this allows the risk assessors and the risk managers to make decisions based on data. You're not guessing everything, but rather you're making these decisions based on the data. Similarly, because this risk event has happened, it means some of your controls have proven ineffective. How do you strengthen those controls? So you can tag these controls saying, this is a control which is like a failed control, or it would have proven effective as well because you were able to move, you were able to make a recovery on it. So your control was really an insurance that you did and it acted. So you can measure your control performance from the risk event saying, oh, now we have these risk events and this is the corresponding impact on the controls. If one of the key other things that customers do when they talk about risk event is they perform what we call it as a root cause analysis of the risk event, saying, if I have this event, how can I prevent this from happening in the future? So you may want to assign root cause analysis task for somebody where he can do your own techniques like the 5 why, fishbone, and other kind of root cause analysis technique. And based on that, say, hey, these are the actions that we need to take to strengthen our control framework, right? You can also tag it to your issues. So generally, customers, when they have this risk events, which are very, very high, having high financial impact, you may want to create issue to get attention of the top management, saying, hey, we have a risk event like this. We are supposed to lose this much. We need to take an action on this immediately. And obviously, you can send it to an approval level. For example, in this case, let's say within retail banking, even though Morgan Hunter is the risk manager within retail banking, it's really Nathan who's responsible for this entire organization. So for him to monitor the business, he needs to have a count on all these risk events. He needs to have a visibility into that. So you can send it for his approval and say, hey, Nathan, based on our analysis, you are losing around $1 million. It's going to impact your bottom line directly, and you better do something around it tomorrow, right? So that's how system automates this entire process. And obviously, once you have done everything, you can also report to your regulators like Basel recommendations. to say these are the risk events that have happened on a quarterly basis, and these are the standard reports that system would create, right? So this is how customers can manage the entire life cycle of these risk events in one centralized system. So you have the proactive side and the reactive side, both working together to minimize your losses.
So risk events, the way we're defining them, aren't just traditional financial loss events.
No,
it goes beyond just loss events. It's legal issues. It's a myriad of other things besides just it's anything that affects employees or IP or natural disasters. All of those things. So we've created sort of a superset of this concept.
Yes.
And risk events are a really great way to potentially predict other risk events.
Absolutely.
So if you see a risk event happening over and over again, you can track, if it's improving.
Yes.
If your controls are working, or if you haven't got the right controls in place, you can assess that. You can assess the risks. And then if you start seeing a pattern, you can start saying, wait a second, this happens every month at a certain time. Next month, we better watch because this might happen again. And now we have to figure out how to stop it from happening.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the key part is everybody's pushing towards more data-driven risk management.
Mm-hmm.
This is the way to actually collect this data.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't do this, there's no way you will be able to predict what's going to happen tomorrow. For me, and this is one of the key reasons we were looking at it more broadly and just not financial focus, because even if a risk has not a financial impact, it has a reputational impact to your organization.
Mm-hmm.
Your brand image is what drives your shareholder value. You need to manage it.
You lose customers.
You lose customers.
And actually lose it. It's a lot more expensive to lose customers and try to get them back.
Absolutely.
Than even remediating a breach. I've seen statistics on the cost it costs to actually get customers back or loss of customers. It's very expensive. So reputational risk is huge. So that's one of the reasons why you created this risk event versus just a financial loss.
That's correct. I mean, we're really thinking about it bigger.
Mm-hmm.
For me to tomorrow provide simulation capabilities or maybe integrate with some of our partners who have advanced simulation techniques, I can share this database with them. They can use this to do their Monte Carlo simulation and stuff like it, and then say in the future we're going to lose this.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. So this is the second then main enhancement to our operational risk capabilities.
Yeah.
That's part of the advanced risk application. That's wonderful.
And if you look at it, you want to have these dashboards for your risk executives, saying within your organization, how much is your gross loss at an aggregated level? How much is your net loss? How many events have happened? How many of them are near miss? Basically, the event happened, but your controls kicked in and it safeguarded you, right? So you can look at that kind of information and then manage this. So this is, again, just one sample dashboards that customers can create. Using our performance analytics capabilities, you can look at the trends. So you can see on an average, how much are we losing? How well are we doing? Those kind of things. So you're really using this risk event capability first to learn how well are you doing your risk management, as well as to measure the effectiveness of your organization risk management policies. Because over the period of time, your losses should trend downwards. And that is a good reflection that you are doing your operations better and you're improving your net margins.
So we have a question here. How does risk events coincide with incidents? They seem similar.
Oh, no. So incidents are just one of an event. They may have implications towards risk or they may not. So one of the thought process we have internally is an incident will escalate to a risk event. So some things which have of implication towards my risk, that's called as a risk event, for which I want to do either a financial analysis or it has a non-financial impact to it. So that's how I would differentiate, and I'm going to use this as a database to predict my risk in the future.
Okay, that's fabulous. So this is a great overview of risk events. And this is, again, a way to create a common language and a way to communicate across a familiar form, essentially, yeah, with the reports. This is great. Anything else to show us?
That's pretty much it. So that's all I wanted to cover today.
All right, well then we appreciate you guys joining us. Let me just put up my slide here and we'll give you the link to the website. And we are very excited about all the things that are happening in New York for GRC. And we're very, very happy that you guys have joined us. And thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you again for joining us. I have included the link for the community in case any of our viewers have more questions to reach out to you all on the New York, and to also give us feedback to see what other items that they might be interested in seeing from you all about the GRC product. So again, thank you all for joining us today. And if you have any other questions, just put them on that community link, and then we'll engage with you there. And we look forward to having you on our next Ask the Expert. Thank you all.